Yo, yo, yo. I'm here.
Game time decision coming out like a champion.
Very, very questionable tag. I didn't even do the Around the 412 regular show this week. Shout out to Eddie Provident for stepping in, doing the show with Tyler on Sunday, and filling in for me. The last few days post-surgery have not been too great. I was able to get in a comfortable enough position to do this show. So without further ado, this is the Around the 412 Fantasy Football Show. I'm your host, Smitty. With me, as always, every single week are my boys Joe and Drew. What's going on, fellas?
Man, I just can't believe it. We had the pregame warm-up. We weren't sure if he was going to be able to pull through, but the guy just goes out there and gets it done. Just a straight-up dog, as Drew would say.
Yep.
Yeah, it's going to be more interesting, I think, post-surgery the next time. If you guys follow me on Twitter or whatever, you've seen, like, unfortunately, this surgery was not able to take care of everything, so they need to actually open up my knee to take care of what they need to take care of. I don't want to say this surgery was unsuccessful because, like, it served a purpose, just not the purpose. So it's going to be interesting those 6 weeks following that surgery. However, for the next few weeks at least, I'm going to be able to be here. So let's rock and roll. What are we talking about tonight?
Fantasy football.
What?
Fantasy football. I liked it.
Oh.
I liked it. Well, before we dive into anything too much. How did we do this week in fantasy football?
You want to start, Drew?
Yeah, picked all three leagues. Average of like 45 points probably between the three.
Nice.
Shanahan can go to hell because he can't pick a running back and he puts a fullback back there and starts taking touches away from Trey Sermon. I'm just so sick of his shit. We're not going to talk about that. We're going to play through and hopefully win some more next week.
I think there's an issue right now with StreamYard because it tells me 0 viewers. However, from looking at the Twitter, it says 26. So if you are in here and can comment, let me see if I can see it. If not, I'm going to pull up the YouTube video and make sure that I have that up because hopefully it will show me a live chat there. Let me see if I can see this. My own comment. No.
Yeah, I
Interesting.
didn't see that either.
Interesting. But that's not good.
Actually, it just came up just now.
Okay. Yeah, it's telling me, even it says right here, like, can't post comments to some destinations. I've never seen that before.
I was coming up during Platt's picks too. Remember I sent you that message?
Oh. See, I know that there was a thing like Periscope isn't like a thing anymore for destinations.
Yeah, it
So
looks like, yeah, it says Periscope it can be reading and posting, but Twitter cannot. So I would imagine.
So that obviously has something to do with it.
Yeah.
But I just wonder. So we'll see if people comment from YouTube, I guess. But we're not going to know a live viewer count, except for if I look at like it says 13 on Twitter. Hopefully that's accurate. I don't know. Who knows? Either way, the show will be up on YouTube afterwards. You can always watch it back on Twitter. It's just going to be kind of frustrating if we're not able to answer anybody's questions in here. So if you're on Twitter right now and you have the ability to go over to the YouTube page, comment there because they're at least coming through maybe a little bit late. I don't know. It seems like there's some type of delay, but they are coming through. So if you have any questions, make sure that you head over to the YouTube. While you're there, subscribe to the channel, leave us a like. Also turn the notification bell on so you know when we go live or post a new video. But that's where it looks like you're going to have to ask us questions and comment on the video. This is weird. This is the first time that we've done a show dealing with this. So the show must go on.
All right, we'll do it. And I'll keep tabs on the Twitter page as well. So if people do have questions that come up, then we can try to get those fielded.
Or, yeah, like if you're watching and it's not going through, just tweet, literally, like, at us. We'll get the notification. I guess we can bring it up live while we're on here. But, yeah, I asked you guys how your fantasy teams did. I actually went 3-1 this week. I fully expect to go winless in our Dynasty League. I'm just curious as to how many times I'm going to win Manager of the Week. That's what I'm looking at.
You'll get one win because you play me week 7 and literally 80% of my team is on bye that week. So
he planned it.
My boy Boston's in here. Yeah. Big shout out to Boston, by the way. He's checked on me like every day since surgery. So big shout out to Boston. I am on here. I was feeling good enough to be able to venture downstairs and do the show. But yeah. So like I said, that dynasty league, yeah, maybe I catch Drew week 7 because of all the buys, but it's not a pretty sight. My team right now, I drafted like all year 1 and year 2 players, so
Future's bright though.
I did this.
I mean, yeah, hopefully, like all my quarterbacks, like are Burrow, Lawrence, and Zach Wilson. So like theoretically, those guys pan out. I shouldn't have to draft a quarterback for a while,
Right.
but who knows if that's going to happen? That early return on investment isn't that great for Zach Wilson.
Yeah, I went 7-5 this week. I think I had my narrowest victory in the history of my fantasy football career. I won by 0.02 of a point thanks to 2 overtime field goals from Daniel Carlson. So shout out to that guy, really getting it done when it matters most. I had like the 99% like chance of a loss, and then they kicked the first field goal, and I was like, okay, like there's some chance here, and then they ran the ball down to like the 1 yard line at the very end of overtime. And I was like, they're just going to punch this in, aren't they? But got those last 3 points, and it was like 110.42 to 110.40. So it was insane. I've been like anxiously awaiting a stat correction to just ruin it for me.
I know that doesn't really have to do with fantasy, but like I was sitting there like monitoring that game on my phone, and I'm just like, what are they doing? Like both teams have had possession. Like the Raiders at any point can kick a field goal to win this game.
Right.
Why are they risking fumbling or like something there instead of kicking? But
I was watching that game, but it looked like they were trying to move the ball to the left side so Carlson could kick from that side, and then they just kept getting tackled on the right side, so they kept running.
So kind of like the reverse of what was the college game? NC State, who upset Clemson.
Right.
They put their field goal kicker in the perfect spot. Like they ran a play to get center, and the dude had shanked 2 already to the left. He did it a 3rd time when they centered it. So I was sitting there thinking, like, why didn't he go down on the right hash? And he didn't. He, like I said, he centered the football, and then he shanked a 3rd straight kick. But anyway, yeah. So first off, Joe, the fact that you're in enough leagues to go 7-5 in a week is kind of ridiculous. But
yeah.
How many times do you have a player that you're also playing against? It's got to be nearly every week.
It does happen to some degree, but I think that like I have like a pretty consistent set of people that like I target. I play in quite a few auction leagues as well, so I'm not really constrained by like, oh, like I was drafting 3rd and then I was drafting 5th and then it was this. It's like, all right, like I had a pretty consistent strategy with how I approach the auction draft. So a lot of my teams are pretty similar.
Oh, okay.
So it's kind of like an all in or it's all terrible. But I also have 2 or 3 dynasty leagues that I'm in. I think the one that we're all in is really the only one that I'm doing well in.
This team
yeah. But that was just the benefit of going first overall that made it kind of easy for me. So
Drew, I don't know if you answered this and I was trying to figure out the comments thing, but what was your fantasy week like?
Oh, we want to talk about that again? Oh,
I'm being serious. I didn't hear you because I was trying to figure out the comments thing. So if I'm bringing up bad memories here.
So in my defense, I had 4
so it wasn't good.
starters that were out this week, and I was trying to plug and play guys on Sunday morning just to figure something out. Like at one point, I didn't have a defense until like 3 in the afternoon because I needed the roster spot, and I was just waiting for Darrell Henderson to be labeled out inactive so I can move in and pick up a defense.
Yeah.
It was a struggle. I was pretty happy that I picked up Hunter Renfrow, though, in our dynasty, and I was able to put him in there, and he got me a solid 19, but it was brutal. I lost all 3 leagues in a margin of probably 45. I think our dynasty I lost by like 15, but there was a league I lost by like 80, and I got smoked. The guy had the high score, and I got nothing, so that was brutal. I was undefeated in that league, though, so it's fine. I can take 1 loss, and hopefully Darrell Henderson, Antonio Brown, Deontay come back this week, and we can recover a little bit. But 0-3 got smoked. Brutal.
Shout out to you, though, for having Hunter Renfrow. I appreciate somebody sticking up for the elder statesman. I think he's like 50, somewhere around there, years old. So, but anyway, so we can dive into this now, I guess. You guys, as you know, if you've watched the show before, we have the fricker ticker going at the bottom of the screen. By position, this is cumulatively all 3 of us, our rankings put together. Quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end. You will see those change throughout the show. We'll just keep putting a different one up If you have any questions on those rankings, you can bring them up now. We put those up there just so, on Sunday, no one's asking us, hey, should I play Matthew Stafford or Ryan Tannehill? Or something like that. Just you can look at the rankings and go based off that. Those obvious questions. But other than that, what do we want to jump into? Injury updates. Drew, I know that you want to play a buy low, sell high game as well. What do you guys want to do first?
Knock out the injuries. They're pretty quick.
All right, go ahead. Let's roll.
So everybody knows Christian McCaffrey got hurt on Thursday night. Hamstring injury. He's going to miss some time. Fantasy Pros actually put out an article that running backs generally that suffer from hamstring injuries miss about 2.2 weeks per injury. So there's probably a good chance you're not going to see him for at least 2 weeks. I wouldn't be shocked if it was more. Austin Eckler missed like 7 weeks last year with his brutal hamstring injury. So it could be a large range. You have to keep up on that. But Chuba Hubbard is 100% top waiver priority for this week. People need to get on that. If you have a number one waiver, if you have some fab, I would say maybe 25 to 30% of my fab would go to Chuba Hubbard if you're in a fab league. I don't know if you guys agree with that. But you saw what Mike Davis did last year when McCaffrey was down. So Chuba Hubbard has to be a target for this week.
Yeah, and I think coming out of college, he was very well recognized as a good pass catcher. So he really fits well into this offense. I will say that going into this week, do temper your expectations. I know that Dallas has struggled a bit as like a fantasy defense overall. They're giving up the 6th most points in the league currently overall for fantasy, but they're actually a middle of the pack team for running backs. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey is a very dynamic player, but I ultimately think that this is going to benefit DJ more than most. That being said, we don't know what the timetable of the injury was. Like you said, they didn't put him on IR, so we're probably looking at a week or two, especially if you are a team that is 0-3, 1-2, and need to get these next couple weeks to get the gears going. Chuba Hubbard's definitely a must-have player that you're going to want.
I do have Chuba Hubbard in a lead already. I picked him up. I also picked up, and we can go to this, Drew, if you have that on there. If you don't, I'm not sure if you think he's going to miss this week. I picked up Madison from the Vikings. Do we think that Dalvin Cook returns this week? If not, where do we see Madison slotting in here as like a viable RB1, RB2 play?
Yeah, so Madison showed up last week. He had like 23 points. He should be a guy that should be rostered no matter what, even if Dalvin Cook comes back and plays, because you can see that he can go down at any time. Same with Tony Pollard. He should be rostered.
Well, given Cook, not to cut you off, but given Cook's injury history, if I drafted Cook, I would have been handcuffing him regardless.
If you draft the running back in the first round, especially in the top 5, and you don't own their handcuff, you don't know how to play fantasy football. It's as simple as that. And Alexander Madison, come on, man. Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara, Zeke, CMC, you need to own handcuffs on these.
Well, see, the reason that like I will agree with that for the most part is when you have, like I said, the injury history that Dalvin Cook and now Christian McCaffrey in multiple seasons in a row. Like if you don't take Chuba Hubbard and along with Christian McCaffrey in next year's draft, yeah, I think you're doing yourself a disservice because you could get in a situation where, for example, I don't want to put my friend Ross on the spot here on the show, but he has Christian McCaffrey in a league. I was able to pick up Chuba Hubbard before him. Now he's in a spot where he doesn't have much running back depth and doesn't have the guy he easily could have just by handcuffing his number one pick.
You can lose your fantasy football league and by making the wrong choice in round 1. You can't win it. But if you have a guy like CMC and you don't handcuff him and he misses significant time, you're not making the playoffs. It's very tough to do that when you lose your best player, unless you really hit a home run in the middle rounds. It's just it's very difficult, very difficult. I don't think I've ever been in a league where I did not handcuff my player because injuries happen, especially to the running back position. So you should have Tony Jones. You should have Tony Pollard. You need to have these guys. And Dalvin Cook, back to his injury with a sprained ankle, we'll have to watch throughout the week to see if he practices. He didn't practice at all last week. I personally don't think that he will play, but if he practices by Friday, he's been in the league long enough that they'll probably be okay with bringing him out there with less practice time. But if he doesn't practice at all, he's probably going to sit again.
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying about the handcuffing, but you could have done that. You could have drafted Murray, and then he got cut by the Saints. So it's like it's not a guarantee, and just because there's a handcuff doesn't necessarily equal the same amount of production. I don't like Madison this week against Cleveland. They're only giving up 13.1 points per game in PPR against running backs. So that's actually the third worst or fourth worst in the league right now. So I think that's a tough matchup. I think that Cleveland overall, their defense is very improved. That front four for them is just nasty. Myles Garrett had like 5 sacks last week. So they're really coming in hot. But yeah, I don't think Dalvin Cook is going to play. I don't think it's worth it. If it was maybe like a divisional game, something like that, I could see it. But against the Browns, I don't think it's going to happen.
If you have other options, definitely something to consider. But you might not have better options than Alexander.
Oh, sure. No, for sure. And he is the best handcuff in the league, I would say. I think him and Pollard would be like 1 and 2 for me. But yeah.
He has some standalone value.
Yeah.
All right. To keep it rolling with injuries, do we have anything else on there besides CMC and now Cook?
AJ Brown, he has a hamstring injury as well. He's considered week to week. The Titans generally keep it safe with their guys. If they're not 100%, they like to hold them out. I know AJ Brown probably sat out a few games last year when he probably could have came back and played. They like to keep it safe, and especially with their addition of Julio Jones, I think that they might be more reluctant to play him if he's not 100%. I expect Julio to break out over the next 2 weeks because they have a very good schedule the next 2 weeks. They play the Jets this week, and then they have the Jags next week. So I would definitely be happy about that. I know he's been starting a little slow, but I expect a big uptake in Julio Jones's production. And Derrick Henry is probably going to get even more of a load than he's already been getting, for sure.
Such a beast.
Is that possible?
Yeah.
But listen, I mean, let's go back to what we brought up in the very first episode of this. Like, where exactly can Derrick Henry finish amongst running backs in the PPR league with him not catching passes? Okay, well, all of a sudden this year he's catching some passes.
Right.
And we've talked about it. We're only 3 weeks into this thing, but he's clearly away right now as RB1.
He has like a 20-point lead too. He has at least half of his total receptions for his career. He has to have. I think his max was like 20 or something in his career. He's got to have at least 10 already. He had 5 last week, didn't he?
So do we think that that's an offensive coordinator change thing?
Absolutely. So he had his career high was last year. He had 19 catches on 31 targets. He has 12 receptions in 3 games and 13 targets. It's really unbelievable the way, and he's one of those guys that as soon as he gets to his top speed, which it doesn't take him a lot of time to do it, like he's impossible to bring down. So it's surprising to me. Like I don't expect him to go out into the slot and go and become this like dynamic like route runner, but you got to find the way to get your best players the ball. I mean, a little play action screen to him, like that's just money in the bank. Like if I'm playing Madden, I'm doing that pretty much every time.
There's a good chance he could take a screen to the house on any play too. Once he's open in space and he can get a full head of steam, no corners taking him down.
Yeah,
it's
because
good.
I think
they're throwing the ball now for sure.
The big knock on him was he had 378 rushing attempts last year, 303 the year before, and then there was no volume as far as the target share. But now he's getting targets. He's already had, and he seems to be able to handle the durability of just taking on that many carries. It's really phenomenal. I mean, if you think about like, I know we talked about a couple weeks ago, like the number of carries that he had in high school, the number of carries that he had in college, and his ability to continue to take on these like absurd workloads. I think his senior year of high school, he had like 500 attempts or something like that. But I mean, who wouldn't when you had Derrick Henry playing like as your high school running back? But
he had
the dude's just a machine.
Attempts in high school, 950.
Yeah.
Like 946 or something with like 5,000 yards rushing or something.
I wonder, so I'm trying to think that I'm bringing this up as a question. I'm not saying this is like factual. I'm just looking at the history of their new offensive coordinator, Todd Downing, who the only time that he has called plays before, he was the offensive coordinator for the Raiders in 2017 when he took over there. But he's had multiple roles. He was the Titans tight end coach when Arthur Smith was there. He had that position with the Vikings in 2018. But he's also been a quarterbacks coach, both with the Raiders in 15 and 16. And previously, before that, was the Bills. He was also with the Lions in 2009, 2010. Like, was this a trend based off those destinations and what we saw from him there that we should have seen coming?
Who was the running back in 2017 for the Raiders?
That would have been what the year? No, that's 2 years before Jacobs. Was Was Latavius Murray there?
Maybe I can look for you.
Jalen Richard.
Oh God, I mean,
It would have been Marshawn Lynch.
Yeah, Marshawn. How many receptions he have that year?
All right, you ask a lot of good questions.
I mean, if he had a ton of
20 catches for 151 yards.
but he wouldn't have been. Was Jalen Richard on the roster? Because he would have been the receiving back.
Yeah.
Let's see.
But see, the reason that I bring this up is because I think
Richard
that
was the receiving back.
Okay, what did
and
he
they
do
had
in
DeAndre Washington as well.
Okay. Richard had how many catches?
36. Washington had 45. Washington had 34. Richard had 27.
Oh, okay.
And they also had Cordarrelle Patterson as well.
The Titans don't use any other running back, so he's going to get all those.
So, like I said, the reason I bring this up, it's, I guess, it's just a learning experience, I guess, like not just for us, but for you guys out there. Like when you see a team make a change at offensive coordinator, you might be able to do a little bit of research there to find out if a player on your team or that you might want to draft, if we could see their role change. For example, we've all, and it very well, he still could have a great season, turn this thing around. Calvin Ridley, borderline round one, first part of round two player. They got a new offensive coordinator in Arthur Smith. Is that the reason that we haven't seen that production be where we thought it was going to be? It's only 3 weeks, but I'm just saying, is this something to look at, not just for this year, but I think going forward when you see offensive coordinator changes around the league.
No, that's such a great point because speaking on the coordinator for Atlanta, very much run dominant player. I think if Mike Davis was doing a little bit more, I'd feel differently, but I think there's a common theme between Atlanta and Pittsburgh quarterbacks right now that they're just don't got much of a line and they're getting old. So it's not fun for them right now, but still a lot of football left. I think the talent's there. But yeah, Ridley, I think as far as like a value relative to draft position is definitely trending towards bust category when people thought he could potentially be wide receiver one. So it's very surprising. But still a lot of football left. I still believe in Calvin Ridley. I think Matt Ryan can turn it around. So I wouldn't panic on it just yet.
This is week 3. We're heading into week 4. This is something to maybe revisit at the end of the year. But I think it's going to be fun now for us to go into our first couple episodes next season before the season starts and look around the league and say, hey, this team made an offensive coordinator change. Is this player going to have that exact same type of role, or is it something we have to monitor? Did he run the same type of offense in his previous destinations? What were those, everything into one.
Before we go to the last injury, we should definitely
go
look
ahead.
at Matt's comment because we talked about this early in the season about the vampire leagues.
Yeah.
Vampire league where he's the vampire and he was able to get his first win this week as the vampire. So he's allowed to take any player off that roster. And he's looking at Dalvin Cook, Mahomes, and DK Metcalf.
I mean, Dalvin Cook was drafted as the second overall player in fantasy leagues. Assuming this isn't like a 2 QB league or something. Or like,
here's the only thing that I will say to counter this. That is great, but the key to vampire leagues is you got to keep winning. So if you take Cook and that's not helping your team this week,
he doesn't play this week. That's true.
Then it's like you're better off taking another guy just because availability is the best ability. Because if you keep stacking wins, then you're going to have everybody's best player. So to me, I would not be taking Cook even unless he's playing.
What's the roster look like too? See if we can wait a little bit and see what he can.
Yeah, I mean, we can start. Just what's the last thing that you got on injuries? We can circle back to this when he comments back.
Yeah. So the last one was just a nice easy one. Juju and Gronk, they both have rib injuries. Both are expected to play. I wouldn't have too much concern there, especially Gronk's a must start at tight end. Juju's basically a start most weeks. They should be good to go. Obviously, watch how they practice throughout the week, but there's no real concern whether or not they're going to go or not. So,
what are your thoughts about someone like Rashad Bateman that are coming off the IR this week? Is that somebody that you're looking to stash? Is that like a wait and see for you? Because I mean, at least from the little bit of reports that we saw going into camp for the Ravens, people were raving about him as like, all right, he's the number one receiving option. You look at the game last week, Marquise Brown dropped a couple of touchdowns. Sammy Watkins has had like a 20% target share in each of the first 3 games. Mark Andrews is commanding like a pretty decent target share. So are you doing anything with guys that might have started the year on the injury list? Drew, I know in the past you've said that you kind of fade people if they've missed the beginning of the season. But is there any interest there maybe for like deeper leagues?
I usually fade, like you said, but I had that conversation with Tyler on Twitter. A lot of things changed for me this week watching how poorly Marquise Brown played with all those drops. I felt going into this week that Lamar was starting to find a rhythm with Brown and Watkins, and I thought that they were just going to consistently keep that role. But the way Brown played this weekend with all those drops, it makes me a little concerned that maybe that trust faded a little bit. I don't think that I would use a priority waiver on him. I think I would wait for him to clear before I even considered it.
Right.
It depends what you have on your bench. But like I said, I'm concerned usually when these guys miss a lot of time, what their conditioning is like. It's going to take them weeks to really get back. So
for sure.
If you can stash them and you're willing to wait, maybe you can get a second half move. But there's people on Twitter thinking that Rashad Bateman's going to be Odell Beckham from his rookie year, where he came out from his injury and he just blew up the moment he came on the scene. I just don't see that. I don't think that their offense supports that many wide receivers. Obviously, they're more of a running team. Lamar's going to run it more. But the way Marquise Brown played this week, it's definitely worth considering because Bateman, he's very talented. He could potentially do something. So,
yeah, I loved him coming out of this class. The thing is, had he not gotten hurt, he would have been the receiver that everybody would have been drafting for the Ravens. Like before Marquise Brown, before anybody would have considered Sammy Watkins or something in a deeper league or just looking for a guy for week 1 because we know what Watkins typically does in week 1. Rashad Bateman would have been the guy drafted from that Ravens receiving room. I am hesitant on him until we see some type of body of work here. Just because, like you said, we're talking about a run-first team. Regardless of what Hollywood Brown did last week, it just seems like him and Lamar have such a good relationship. I don't ever see him like going away from him or seeing that level of trust go away. So, like, I would have to see it to believe it that Rashad Bateman's going to end up being like wide receiver 1 of that offense.
Agreed. And Sammy Watkins is getting a huge target share, like you said.
Yeah.
That matters that they're throwing the ball to him like that. So back to Matt, though, he has priority waiver too, so he's going to get Chuba. That obviously helps. I'd like to know who his quarterback is, though.
In my mind,
Mahomes.
Yeah, I mean, in my mind, though, like Mahomes has like a matchup this week. I mean, granted, it is Mahomes, but to me, it seems like DK might be the person that I would be leaning towards, just because he kind of came on strong last week, and he definitely has that rapport with Russ. I think not having Cook, I probably wouldn't feel too great about picking somebody that's not going to be playing. So I think it would be Mahomes or DK. I think that you can find a suitable.
Yeah, I'd keep Tannehill and roll with that.
Yeah, so DK would probably be my pick for that. But unless you don't think that Cook is going to be out for that long, and having Chuba is worth like enough that he can fill that gap until you get Cook back.
Should we talk about Josh Gordon at all?
Josh Gordon hasn't been relevant since 2013. He's just like this like freak athlete that people are still waiting for him to come back. I hope the best for him. I mean, he's definitely been through a lot like as a human, but I mean, no one else on that team is doing anything besides Kelsey and Hill. Like it's just not going to happen. They've never supported another receiver outside of that. I don't think that changes.
It's been too long since anyone besides Hill and Kelsey have been fantasy relevant, and it's been too long since Josh Gordon stepped on a football field. He's going to be on the practice squad and maybe gets elevated for a couple games like Des Bryant did last year, which was absolutely useless too.
Let's bring back Martavis. Stretch the field.
I prefer Martavius personally, but
oh man. You know what? So funny story actually. Before we get into the buy low, sell high, Martavis Bryant, Stephon Tuitt, Bud Dupree, Chris Boswell, they were doing an autograph signing, and our friend got us like these priority tickets for it to get stuff signed for a charity event that we were doing. And so I was like going through getting stuff signed, and because Suet and Bud had some type of deals, they couldn't sign jerseys, so they could only sign the pictures that they already had there. That was the only thing that they could sign. But I had a little conversation with Martavius, and I asked him about that, people calling him Martavius, and all he did was laugh and say, "People know it's not my name." I'm like, bro, I'm not so sure that they do know that that's not your name.
Right. No, that's a people from Pittsburgh
even if
struggle
people would
with a
spell
lot.
it, people would spell it with a U.
I mean, people haven't even figured out Tomlin after how many years? I mean,
Tomlinson.
Yeah. Fire Tomlinson.
I mean, James Conner, just here last year, everyone spelled his last name wrong.
yeah.
Crazy. But
Good game
okay.
for him last week.
Drew, I know you're looking forward to that. By the way, speaking of that game, Drew, I know you want some recognition for the James Conner 2-touchdown game. So there it is. And also, let's get into your favorite segment.
We're going to make you play Tinder this time.
Ooh.
I'm looking forward to it.
All right, so we're going to do buy low, sell high, swipe right or left, Tinder style. I'll let you guys know if the guys buy low or sell high when I ask them. But
Christian Mingle better, but
buy low or sell high.
Plenty of fish. Coffee meets bagel, perhaps.
all right, let's go.
All right, so we'll start with a buy low. Allen Robinson.
Yeah, I'll swipe right on the idea of that. I would buy low on him because I don't think that Chicago's offense can be any worse than what we just saw happen against Cleveland. Unfortunately, my guy Darnell Mooney is not breaking out because of the way that offense is playing. I would like to see Fields stay at quarterback, but regardless of who is quarterback, I still think that Robinson is he's too talented. I think that he's eventually going to start putting up a better floor for himself just off his talent alone. So I don't know what people would be looking for in a trade for him, but I can't imagine that it's much. If you can get him for, I'm trying to think of a good player to throw out there.
I threw this out there because I don't think that anyone says no to anything, essentially. If they can get someone they think they could start in the flex spot. He's been that bad.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, if you look at the numbers, so Justin Fields went 6 for 20 with 68 yards. Allen Robinson played essentially every snap last week, had a 30% target share, and then Mooney had a 20% target share. But
there we go.
If only 6 passes get caught that whole day, that's just not going to get it done for anybody. I can't imagine a scenario where this continues. And for whatever reason, Allen Robinson is the QB killer. He is constantly in bad QB situations, but he always makes the most of it. I'm definitely on the buy low side of it as someone that's maybe a comparable trade. Maybe you swing the conversation for one of the guys from Baltimore and say, hey, look at this target share they're getting, these targets, let's make it happen. Or maybe you throw something out there to me, Brandon Ayuk, he had a solid game last week. Maybe say, hey, look, Ayuk's coming on. You want to make the swap for Robinson. I think that could work out pretty nicely. Or someone maybe like Marvin Jones, who's been the top receiver for the Jaguars all of a sudden and is getting the targets. He's getting not necessarily the yards, but he's a weekly flex play. So I think there's a lot of ways that you can go about it. I imagine that if somebody had drafted Allen Robinson in the 3rd or 4th round, they're probably maybe a little bit less running back heavy. So you might be able to trade somebody that's been having a decent start, or maybe even something like a Kenyon Drake, who I'm not really think is rosterable, but he's getting enough points in a PPR format that you might be able to con someone into it. But
or Allen Robinson.
Who?
Tyson Williams or Allen Robinson.
Dude, that's hilarious. I was trying to think of guys that are in a timeshare, if you will, but are the 1A in it.
Oh, Allen Robinson every day of the week. Twice on Sunday. Allen Robinson.
See, that's interesting to me because Dale Henderson can get hurt. Obviously, he's hurt now. I think he's going to play this week, but he's had some pretty solid games. So,
and I think it's only going to get easier for the Rams running backs. I mean, you look at what they did last week. I mean, Sony Michel still put up 70, 80 yards, and usually no one gets anything. I mean, Zeke put up 20, 30 yards against Tampa Bay, but that offense is so prolific that they can't stack the box because Cooper Kupp will get 5 touchdowns
Exactly.
So I mean, Henderson, I think that's like a not necessarily a slam dunk, but like that's like a solid trade. And like going into the draft, I mean, you would have taken Robinson over Henderson anytime, but right now it's like I don't know. Would you trade Chuba Hubbard for Allen Robinson?
Absolutely. You're only getting him for a couple weeks probably.
Wow.
Real quick before we move on though, you mentioned Brandon Ayuk.
Yep.
Buy low or swipe right or left?
I mean, the second year receiver is where you see the biggest breakouts. I do think that the whole he's in the doghouse thing was overhyped, and I think we started to see that like he's getting used more like in the San Francisco plans. I know from a running back perspective, they definitely will do whatever they want, and it's kind of hard to predict, but I do think that Ayuk is better than Deebo Samuel, and I think that he is the receiver to own still. I didn't like him as a 5th-round draft pick, but I think for as far as he's fallen, I think there's a ton of value there. I picked him up everywhere that I can this past week before Sunday off of the waivers, and if he is still available as like a pickup, then that's like a top tier like pickup for me. I would even put him ahead of like a Chuba Hubbard as far as like priority this week because a ton of people had been dropping him. So I think he's going to be fine. I think he's going to have a big rest of the year.
I think last week we mentioned Saquon as like that was your last opportunity to buy low. I think that this is Brandon Ayuk's last opportunity to buy low this week. I think he's going to take off. I think he's out of the doghouse if anything. He had a ton of snaps last week. His target share rose drastically. I don't know what the number was.
Do we remember where Deebo Samuel was being drafted?
He wasn't.
7th or 8th round in deeper leagues, right?
Oh yeah, maybe he was. You're right.
I guess that's what I'm looking at. Like to Joe's point, like Brandon Ayuk in round 5 just seems like very steep of a price if you can get Deebo Samuel essentially free. If that were the case, but you're saying it was like round 8.
Yeah,
I'll pull it
but I
up
still
for you.
don't know that there should be that there should have been a 3-round discrepancy there.
I got Ayuk after Samuel in my league. Remember I sent you
Really?
that
Okay.
where he was like 45th, and I was like, I believe he's still on the board.
Yeah.
So Ayuk had a 16% target share last week. If we're looking at draft position, let's see here.
It was under 5% in week 1 and 2 though. So he's out of the doghouse now. If anything, he got a touchdown, red zone target.
Yeah, I think Samuel was like the 8th round, perhaps. I'm trying to find the place that has it because a lot of the websites they'll still let you draft now. So then it's like they're continuously updating that stuff.
I'm gonna see if I can pull up a draft from one of my leagues.
Oh, that's probably a smart way to do it. Yeah, I don't know. We can find it, but yeah, I think he was in that like 8 to 10 round range.
Yeah, I just don't remember seeing him. But yeah, if you're making me pick between him wherever he was going or Ayuk in the 5th, I probably would have taken Deebo with the value.
Yeah, he was drafted in the 9th round in the league that I did.
Okay.
The 97th overall player.
Yeah, because they weren't sure if he was going to start the season with his injuries and all that stuff. But
that's right. Yeah.
But
all
his rookie season.
Who's the next player?
I'll do a sell high option here. Do this one. Jamar Chase. Sell high.
Part of me says yes, mostly because like his rate of like long touchdown passes just doesn't feel sustainable. I just don't know like what realistically people would get for that because I think that's like a common thing that people are going to say, especially with like if he didn't have the preseason struggles, I think it would be a lot easier to sell him because it's like, oh, he's a top 5 pick. Or like in that, he was top 5, right? Or he was
fifth.
yeah, he was 5. So it's like with the preseason struggles, it was like, oh, the first game was a fluke, the second game was a fluke, and now it's like, all right, like this is happening like every week. And when he was in college, he was better than Justin Jefferson. We just saw Justin Jefferson last year go for the 1,400 yards and however many touchdowns that he had. So it's like, should you sign or trade him away? Like, I think it makes sense depending on who you're getting back. But a lot of the guys that in that upper echelon of players, like Hopkins, we've talked about, he's got that lingering issue with the injury. Ridley hasn't really lived up to the hype. I mean, you look at the top 5 for receivers right now, it's a lot of names that we didn't really expect to have. So do you go after one of those guys and like hope that they're able to continue? I think you're selling yourself a little bit too high if you're trading him for like another receiver that's had a hot start. I don't think that's going to do any good. If it were me, I would sell high, try to get one of the like the upper tier running backs and try to boost there. I mean, if you're picking him in the 5th or 6th round, depending on how your draft shook up, or maybe like Darren Waller had like a really big first week, like maybe you can do something to swing a trade for him. I don't think anybody's going to trade Kelsey, but I think that could be a way that you could go. But yeah, I don't think he's going to have a 50, 60-yard touchdown every week, but he's clearly the number 1 guy in Cincinnati. They're going to be throwing the ball a lot, so it's a tough one to let go of. But
if you get to the end of the year and you look at a player, just in general, and they ended the season with 80 total targets, what do you think of? Wait, how do you like that, or is that not enough?
To me, no. I mean, for receivers and PPR, I'm looking for at least 100 targets.
So Jamar Chase is on pace for a 17-game season with 82 targets, and that's with T. Higgins out right now.
Right.
So
that was one of the points I was going to bring up, was going to be that. I think that it matters a lot, Joe. I'm glad that you kind of touched on it. Like, how did they draft, though, at the top? Because, like, if Jamar Chase is playing in as their wide receiver 2 or their flex right now, and they drafted him in round 5, they very well could have gotten, 2. They could have, say they want running back, and they don't even need a running back to trade Jamar Chase for. Or if they went tight end early in there, maybe they didn't get that upper echelon running back, and they could use Chase as a piece there. So I really think it's about how they drafted. You mentioned, though, Drew, T. Higgins coming back at some point. Like, we don't know if it's going to be this week. If it's not, we're going to have, half the season up to this point of games that the Bengals have played where T. Higgins hasn't played, and yet we're going to see that low of a target share for Jamar Chase. Right. Not only that, and I know that this is going to fluctuate as the season goes on, Pittsburgh is the only top 10, not just top 5, top 10, might be top 15 even. As of right now, top 15 matchup that he has remaining on the schedule the rest of the year, not just coming up in the near future, the rest of the year. This upcoming schedule is ridiculous. Jacksonville, as of right now, they're giving up the 17th fewest points to receivers. Green Bay, 26th. Detroit, 22nd. Baltimore, 20th. The Jets, 29th. Cleveland, 27th. That's up until their bye week. Is some of that going to change? Absolutely. The Jets aren't a good defense. They're not going to continue to hold receivers down like that. But this is the body of work that we're looking at right now. So if you can sell a player like this high, if you're comfortable or not comfortable, I should say, with your running back situation, if you can get that top 2 tight end in Darren Waller, why wouldn't you do it?
Exactly. And if you have Jamar Chase and saying that you didn't strike out on some of your earlier picks, you're probably 2-1 or 3-0. You're probably sitting in a good spot. If you have the opportunity to maybe take a loss next week, would you get a guy like A.J. Brown, who obviously that team is probably struggling? He's been out. I know that Joe doesn't like A.J. Brown, but Zach, would you be interested in a guy like A.J. Brown? I actually
who's Zach?
Smitty.
That is very tough. Just because of the build of the offense for Tennessee that we're talking about. Not only are they a run-first team, we're seeing Derrick Henry also get increased targets there. Julio Jones has not looked like completely the Julio Jones of old. I know that they're still like limiting him to an extent as there as well. But yeah, it's just not an ideal situation for me there as well. Like I that's probably like an even trade-off to me. And I don't know that I'd do it.
there's a lot of players that we had high expectations for coming into the season that are struggling, especially wide
But
receivers.
I didn't have AJ Brown in my top 10 coming into the season.
Right. He was just an example. Like Calvin Ridley struggled. I don't think you can get Calvin Ridley for Jamar Chase, but like
I had Calvin Ridley I had him finishing as number 1. So
there's teams that are going to be 0-3 or 1-2 that might become desperate over the next week or two that have these higher echelon guys that are struggling, and they might not be able to wait for them to come back or for them to recover. You might be able to get a guy for a stretch run that's much better. Like I mentioned DeAndre Hopkins to you guys earlier. Like he's struggling right now with that injury, but his upside is so high. If that team continues to struggle with him, and you can maybe take advantage of that team in trade to get a guy like that. Maybe if you have to throw in another piece.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think 0-3 is like where I start to hit the panic button in fantasy football. I mean, you do have the benefit of the extra game this year, assuming that your league also adjusted with that. Right. Funny enough, I would take the A.J. Brown deal. They've had not that different of a target share in terms of percentage, but Cincinnati's actually throwing the ball a lot less than they did last year, and I think that baked into the ADP of Chase that they were assuming that Joe Burrow was going to throw 40, 50 times a game, but the defenses looked improved. They're running the ball more. The offense is flowing more through Mixon, so he's only throwing the ball 20, 30 times a game. Chase in 2 out of the 3 games has had over a target share of 20%, but that's only been like 5 or 6 targets because they're not throwing the ball a ton. So to me, it's like if you can get A.J. Brown, I like that deal personally. I think that is a pretty solid value there. Or if like you drafted, say, like Miles Sanders, like that would be somebody that I would be say like, all right, I'll give you Sanders and Chase and then upgrade my running back. So that could be a way. Or but yeah, I think that's a solid play for sure.
This is kind of goes against everything that we say because it's so unpredictable, but like the touchdowns, right? And I think that's why I'm like slightly leaning Chase here over A.J. Brown is just because I think A.J. Brown between the 20s is more sustainable, but Chase very well could be like the top option in the red zone for Cincinnati, where it's for the Titans, it's Derrick Henry and Julio Jones, in my opinion, before A.J. Brown.
Yeah. I mean, if the first 2 weeks are any indication, T. Higgins is their red zone guy. So to me, it's like if Chase is going to get it done, it's going to be on a big play. At least that's how it's been. That doesn't mean that can't change as he continues to develop, as he gets more comfortable in offense. But
I'm just looking at the idea that he came into the NFL as this jump ball guy. Like that has to play in the red zone. If he's not your top red zone option, but you're right.
Taylor.
Yeah, T. Higgins.
Zach Taylor.
But okay, Drew, what do we got? Anything more?
Yeah, well, let's keep this flow going with another guy that's overachieving for sure, especially in the touchdowns. Adam Thielen, sell high.
So last year, Adam Thielen had an absurd amount of touchdowns. I think he had 13 or 14, and he only had like 80 targets or 90 targets, which was a huge drop off for Thielen. I mean, if you think back like a couple years ago, like he was like 130, 140 target player. And if he didn't have all the touchdowns, like he wasn't really fantasy relevant at all, but he always found the end zone. That scared me off from drafting Adam Thielen. But you know what? He is still their dog in the red zone, and he gets the red zone targets, and he's getting it done. And his target share has been good. He's been over 20% in 2 out of the 3 games. I'm holding. I don't know. Like, I think people are waiting for that regression there. I like what I'm seeing from the Minnesota offense. It's been very balanced, especially knowing that Dalvin Cook is hurt right now. It's like I find it hard to believe that like if you're losing, which I would imagine is their top red zone option in Cook, then Thielen becomes a de facto number 1 there. And he obviously has that chemistry with Kirk Cousins. So Jefferson is doing his thing. This isn't a knock on him at all. But I actually like what Adam Thielen's doing right now. I would hold him for a couple more weeks and then look to continue to sell. But if he did, I couldn't fault you for it either.
I think if you're trading him, it's not because of his regression. You're worried about Kirk Cousins not keeping up his level of play. So I think that's more so the conversation that needs to be had internally for you if you are an Adam Thielen owner is Kirk Cousins just playing way above his head right now with no chance of sustaining this going forward.
Right.
For me, I'm with Joe though. I've had Adam Thielen in the past, and the floor is just very strong with him. Granted, last year, like you said, with the touchdowns, I don't want to say it was like full on Mike Evans because it wasn't, but like Mike Evans last year, where he would have games where he had 2 catches for 3 yards and 2 touchdowns, kept you with a decent floor, but you were always like, what is like, is he, if he doesn't score a touchdown, he didn't do anything.
Yeah. And Thielen this year, target-wise, 10 targets, 7 targets, 9 targets. He's averaging 22% target share on the year, and has actually been over 20% all 3 weeks. And I think there's only like 15 or 16 guys that have done that for all 3 weeks.
There you go.
So to me, it's like targets are going to play like they're king there. So it's like if he's getting a 22% target share, that's very healthy volume. Obviously, if you're getting like a crazy upgrade, then that's great. But yeah, I don't think you're going to get the value of what he's currently providing at unless he continues to have that output. But I'm just enjoying the ride for now.
Drew, you got any more for us?
Yeah, let's go back to the buy low with another good one. Would you buy low on Robert Woods?
You got to think the workload there like evens out somewhat between him and Cooper Kupp, right? I mean,
if you watch these games with the Rams, it doesn't even look like Stafford's looking at him. Unless there's a design play where he's supposed to be going to Woods or he rolls out and he just comes into his vision. If he's on the left side of the field and Kupp's on the right, he's staying to the right side the whole time.
Which, like, out of camp, the hype was between Stafford and Woods. And we've seen, like, the Stafford-Kupp connection be what's carrying that offense to this point. Where is Woods' target share? Is it even, like, above guys like Higbee and Van Jefferson?
So right now, Woods is at 15% week 1. He had 4 targets. He had 9 targets week 2 for a 31% target share. And then week 3 he had 6 targets with a 16% target share. So here's the thing with Woods. He's been on the field pretty much for an identical amount of time as Cooper Kupp. So Cooper Kupp's been on the field 88% of the time. Woods has been on the field 82% of the time. But the target share for Kupp has just been unbelievable. For me right now, until I see more out of him, he's somebody that I'm probably going to keep on my bench. I do think that this is a great buy low opportunity, especially if you want very heavy running back early and are looking to find somebody that that can step up for you in further weeks. Because he has the snap share, I think that you will see some evening out. And even just looking at the way that the Rams conduct their offense, I mean, they design plays for Woods. They want to get the ball into Woods' hands. And if Cooper Kupp continues to play it the way that he is, they're going to have to start doubling him. They're going to have to do something different, and that's going to open up different parts of the offense. So I would try to get Woods. I mean, we talked about Juju a little bit here. Like, if I could swap like Juju for Woods, I would do that in a heartbeat. But I think he has better days ahead. It's not like he's not getting open. It's not like he's doing these things. It's just the first couple weeks, Cooper Kupp's really been on it. If these were sprinkled out throughout the season, no one would even be concerned. But just because it's happened 3 weeks in a row, then we're getting a little bit worried. But
I think he just needs to dye his facial hair blonde or something. Maybe throw a water cooler. And we'll see that target share just even out, and he'll start putting up the same production as Kupp.
It's worked in the past.
17 too. The 2 is I'm not feeling it. Not the number.
True. Maybe Stafford doesn't even realize he's a receiver.
Yeah, he thinks he starts.
Who's this upside down Jalen Ramsey?
Why is my backup quarterback out here?
Makes sense to me.
We got more?
Yeah, there's a couple I definitely want to get to. I want your take on this one, not just for everybody else, but for me, because I'm in this boat right now. But would you sell high on CEH after his big game this week?
Oh, I got burned by CEH last year. I avoided him this year because of that. Seems to have a fumbling issue. Not great in goal line situations. Can you give me like an idea of what a trade would look like?
So I'm trying to find some guys in this area. It's probably going to have to be for a receiver, right? You're not going to be able to swap CEH for a running back.
I wouldn't think so.
So
Would you trade like?
Unless you go like 2 for 1, a little bit like lower end running back and receiver.
CEH is currently the 34th ranked running back behind Kenyon Drake, by the way. Behind Devin Singletary. Behind Zach Moss.
Who was inactive week 1.
But Zach Moss really came on strong last week.
Yeah.
Too, he was active but didn't do much.
Would you trade CEH for Allen Robinson?
Yes.
Absolutely.
So you would be taking Allen Robinson?
I'm actually in a league where that situation is currently being discussed.
Okay. Would you take CEH for Kareem Hunt?
Yes.
I
I don't know what it is, but Kareem Hunt has looked better than Nick Chubb to me in a way this year.
Hey, PFF agrees.
I don't care what they have to say though.
I think Kareem Hunt's RB1 for them right now. He's the great. I think they're 1 and 2
back in fantasy right now. Kareem Hunt.
I think it's partially just because I watch all their games. They've had a lot more like tough fronts, so like they're using screens and stuff to kind of run the offense. I think it'll flip over, but he has standalone value. They split plays in the red zone, so I mean Hunt.
But see,
I don't even view Hunt as a handcuff.
With Jarvis Landry out, I think that helps Kareem Hunt.
That to me just branched off as a separate question, though. Should you be selling high Kareem Hunt?
I can't. I think because if Chubb does get hurt, then Hunt is the guy.
He's a top 5 running back at that point.
So I couldn't get rid of him.
It depends who you're getting back.
We were talking about top handcuffs earlier. We didn't bring up Kareem Hunt. I think it's just because
I don't view him as a handcuff.
I know, yeah. But yeah, I'm just thinking starter goes down. This guy's the number 1 running back right now. Like, who's the best option in the entire league in terms of that?
Would you trade Kareem Hunt for David Montgomery? A guy that has standalone value, but he's in a tough situation. Like David Montgomery's the guy. But
I think I'd rather have Kareem Hunt right now. After what I saw last week.
Hey, Montgomery plays literally every snap, though, for the Bears.
So there's the chance that Kareem Hunt can blow up based on game script. Like, he's game script dependent in a way.
Yeah, that's tough.
But the initial question, CEH.
Would you sell high?
Yeah.
I don't know
if you could.
I don't know if it's selling high.
That's the thing is, like, I don't know if you would be.
He did what he finally was supposed to do.
Well, Andy Reid came out and was just like, we need to get him going, and they gave him the ball. He fumbled in the first quarter, and they didn't waver.
I mean, so did Kareem Hunt. It was for his rookie game. His first game for the Chiefs, he fumbled that first play and then took over after that too. So Andy Reid, he keeps a long leash. I appreciate that. But they also don't really have any formidable backups. They don't have the like the laundry list of
whoa
guys.
Jerick McKinnon.
Darrell Williams is getting a lot of touches too.
All right, Drew, you said you have another one?
What about Saquon Barkley? You sell high? They got the Saints this week too. You wait a week and then maybe wait a week and buy lower.
Yeah, I mean, he's back to his pre-injury usage. So he played 86% of snaps. He got 16 carries, and then he got 7 targets last week, which from a PPR perspective is huge. That's what's saving guys like Austin Eckler. That's what's saving guys like Najee Harris. So that was one of the big perks of Saquon is that, yeah, Jones isn't great, but Saquon as a safety valve, like that's huge points. So I think that even with a tough running script for the Saints, like he still can get the dump offs and have like a pretty sizable day. I think to me, he still falls into that buy low. He hasn't had like the monster 20, 30 point game territory. So I definitely wouldn't be selling, but I would be curious to see what people are wanting for him at this point.
I have Saquon, and he falls into a category for me where it's like I'm not going to be on either side of a trade with him right now. Like I wouldn't trade for him in another league, but I'm also not trading him in the league I own him in.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
He has a tough schedule coming up, so he might be someone worth buying in like 3 weeks. This Saints week, he's going to It's going to be tough.
Yeah. Ask me again at the trade deadline.
What about Zeke after his big game?
Deontay Johnson to the moon. Love it. Says Derek. Just came in here. And we already talked about Deontay. Did I say that on the show or was that before we started recording? Deontay Johnson was in Cooper Kupp situation. Be blowing up right now. If he was in Buffalo instead of Diggs.
I don't know. Buffalo is throwing the ball a lot around. I mean, to me, Diggs is a perfect buy low right now. Like, he has not lived up to the hype. But it's not because, like, targets, it's just they're finding other people in the end zone, and it'd be like that sometimes.
Yeah, get Emmanuel Sanders out of here. What are we doing? He's like 50.
I don't think Diggs owners will take anything less than his value.
Deontay Johnson? Would they take Deontay Johnson?
I doubt it.
So back to the question. Zeke had 70% of the snaps. Pollard had 38. They're actually using them together, which I thought was pretty fun. But Zeke got 20 touches. Pollard got 12. I think Elliott is obviously going to be the guy. I mean, similar to what you said about CEH, they wanted to get him more involved. And I think with Pollard, he's starting to get in that Kareem Hunt type role where he has that standalone value, has a decent floor, but you don't necessarily know when you're going to play him as far as like a game script. We just haven't seen enough of this offense yet to know like when or how he's going to be used. But yeah, I don't think Zeke is going to return based off of where he was drafted at. He did look better. The total yards was nice.
Should you be trying to trade him?
I feel like it was a hot hand last night, and he killed my parlay. By the way, pissed 7 yards.
I told you that was risky. I told you that was the riskiest one.
The Eagles' defense, like Javon Hargrave, is like destroying guys. How did he rush for
Fletcher Cox? Yeah, they got to do defensive front. That's the one thing Philly does have. So if I had to bet on that, I would have gone under like you did, but I just wouldn't have touched it, to be honest with you.
Stayed away. Yeah.
But yeah, Derek said the reason I said that is he has Zeke said trying to trade him ASAP.
Yeah.
So
I think
it's tough because I was in a spot with Zeke where I was like almost like borderline. I think we had this conversation on here where I was like, man, like I almost feel more comfortable with his spot than like Alvin Kamara with all the uncertainty with Breeze retiring. Like if I was picking third this year, I would have been in one hell of a predicament.
Derek, what's your record in that league that you have Zeke in, if you don't mind me asking? Because I feel like a lot of Zeke owners might be 1-2, 0-3.
Let me see. I have Zeke in a couple places, and I actually lost this past week because I had him on the bench. Because
so this is obviously like
I got cute and I started Tyson Williams over him.
Oh.
So I'm 1-2 in that league.
Wait a minute.
Mara, Zeke, and Jones.
I really didn't like the Zeke matchup. The Eagles going into this past week were like one of the worst teams to go against as a running back. I thought that it was going to be more of a passing game. But yeah, I lost by 12.
Oh, so. Okay. Derek's the Aaron Rodgers of this league, sounds like.
We should do a poll and see what people say what their records are with some of these players. Because I think some of these guys, you're in such a deep hole that you have to find a way out with someone better.
By the way, follow Derek on Twitter at Derek_the_kid. That's 2 D's at the end. He had a Twitter Spaces today talking about, like, you know, obviously there's a bunch of Aaron Rodgers noise right now. He was on Pat McAfee's show talking about Tomlin, Pittsburgh, TJ Watt. He threw in there as well, just the people of Pittsburgh. The one thing he said that I hated was that he likes Pittsburgh dad. So I'm not a fan of that, but we'll let that part of it slide. And just talk about everything that's going on with the Steelers right now as well. So definitely one of my must follows in terms of Steelers. Keeper league, had all 3 since they were rookies, 0 chips.
Yikes.
Tough.
It's hard to not get a championship last year when he scored 60 in the championship round. Yikes.
But yeah, I think the Zeke owners, they're having a tough go of it. Definitely some other players out there, but yeah, I'm not liking what I'm seeing. It's just, we'll see. And that's the thing about running backs is they have a very short lifespan in the NFL. Like, I mean, Zeke was the guy. He got paid, and he's done nothing since he got
5
paid.
years, $90 million. Paid him well before they paid Dak.
Yeah.
You guys have anything else before we get out of here and I go ice my knee?
I have one more buy low, and then I just want to do one other player quick.
All right.
So the buy low, you're going to buy low Jonathan Taylor.
Hey, I had him outside of my top 15 when we did bold predictions prior to the season starting. You said he's RB 29 or something right now,
I have him.
maybe in the 30s.
Fine. 34.
However, he was inactive last week, but they are about to get, it sounds like, one of the running backs up out of that room, Marlon
Right.
Mack. We'll see you later. I don't know what that means for him. Joe, I mean, we've had a little bit of a conversation. I always in my head, I'm like, did we have this conversation on the show or was it beforehand? That offensive line, though, is banged up.
They're struggling a lot. They're struggling.
Braden Smith has been out. I don't know when he's going to be coming back. I don't like the situation there. I don't like the quarterback situation even when he's healthy. I'm not in on this Colts offense. Love Jonathan Taylor as a player, but I'm just wondering, like, what value can he really return, like, 8th overall, 9th overall value in that offense?
No, I don't think he can. And I think the biggest problem, truthfully, I mean, the offensive line has had its issues going into the season, injuries aside. But I think the biggest problem that they're having is at the quarterback position with Carson Wentz. I think people had a lot of value baked into the idea that, all right, like Wentz is going to be an improvement from Phillip Rivers, and he hasn't been. And I think that's really hurting Taylor. They can key on him because, I mean, he's probably their best offensive player, in my opinion. So it's like they're able to stack the box. Carson Wentz has done a terrible job of like recognizing like pre-snap like play calling and making adjustments to the line to like make their lives easier. And they haven't really been moving the ball all that well, in my opinion. So for me, I probably wouldn't touch Taylor unless I'm getting something like really absurd and it's not really affecting my starting lineup all that much. But it's still too early in the season before something like that would happen. One caveat I will say is that he also started slow last year, but that was more of he wasn't getting the reps. He was struggling, and it's a full-blown timeshare. I mean, Marlon Mack comes back from an Achilles injury, and then he's just getting 30% of the snaps. It's like, all right, like, what are we doing here? You go out and sign Naheem Hines to be one of the top 10 paid running backs in the league. Like, what are we doing here? So it's very bizarre. I don't want any part of that right now.
What's your long-term, Smitty, with Jonathan Taylor? The long-term scope?
Well, you know that dynasty team that I'm 0-3 in that league. I have Jonathan Taylor in that league. So they're not. How long are they even attached to Carson Wentz for?
Thought it was only
because
a couple years.
I believe in that offensive line in general. They're not like very old, other than they're going to have to find a left tackle replacement. Eric Fisher's just like a stopgap solution for them. But obviously Quentin Nelson's a building block piece for them there. He's going to be there. Braden Smith they just recently paid. Like, I like that offensive line as a whole. I like Jonathan Taylor as a player. To me, it's going to be about just continuing to build up those skill position players. Like right now you have Michael Pittman Jr., the ghost of T.Y. Hilton, who's on IR right now. Zach Pascal's okay. Paris Campbell's okay, but he's more of like a gadget guy. They don't even use him as a traditional receiver. I mean, it's just not – they need to continue to build that, I think. But, yeah, first and foremost, what's the quarterback situation looking like down the line? How long are they attached to Carson Wentz? Did we find that out?
So he signed –
but his guaranteed money is only after this year.
Okay.
He has this year and then next, like is this the 2020? So he'll have 2021 for this season. He has 2022, and then they can cut him without any dead cap going into 2023. But that contract technically goes to 2025.
Yeah, he's not.
Yeah, but that's
this year, though. So they could keep the dead money.
I mean, barring him getting back to like the level he was playing at under Frank right before, I don't see a way that he is there past 2022 then.
What do you think of Pittman real quick before we get off here? Because
I love Pittman as a player, but
right? He's hit, 12 targets the last 2 weeks, each week?
Yeah, he kind of underwhelmed as a rookie. I expected he would take a year 2 leap, but it's, you go back to the quarterback play. How much of a leap can you take with what he's getting from that right now? I mean, the targets are going to be there.
He's producing very well with bad quarterback play. So if he picks it up, he might be in must-start territory.
I mean, he has had 12 targets in both of the last 2 weeks.
What was it like week 1? Is that like a significant jump the last 2 from?
Yeah, he only had 4 targets in week 1. Zach Pascal had like the 2 touchdown game though. He was magnet in the red zone.
Could be fluky.
Like the random game that he had in 2019 against the Steelers, Zach Pascal.
Yeah, exactly.
I love Michael Pittman Jr. though. He was my guy like in 2020 at 49, and then the Colts took him, and we settled for a guy that had like 13 touchdowns as a rookie and Chase Claypool, so whatever.
All right, so we'll get off the whole buy low thing, but I saw something on Twitter while we were talking, and it was actually a guy I had on this list. I wanted to get your input.
Okay.
There's a lot of chatter on Twitter right now about guys saying that they would consider trading one of their top end quarterbacks, a Kyler Murray, a Dak, guys like that, if you can start Jalen Hurts each week. What are your thoughts?
I mean, as a professional football player, Jalen Hurts had an absolutely abysmal performance yesterday, and scored 20 points.
He outscored Dak Prescott. And
right.
He was awful.
And so here's what I'm seeing, at least from the Philly situation, at least for the balance of this year. We know what Minshew can do. They're not going to put him in. Who is their backup? Flacco, not going to happen. So Jalen Hurts is going to get this like ride or die. Like they're not going to switch out of it. I don't see that happening. To me, it seems like they're trying to push like the mobile quarterback thing, like almost like when Michael Vick was with the Eagles, and like they're doing too much and not putting him in a position to succeed. The benefit there as a fantasy owner is that you're going to have a high floor as far as rushing goes. Like he's running way more than any other QB in the league right now. So, I mean, that inherently is going to, because that's from a points perspective, you get more points from running the ball than throwing the ball. So if he's constantly running, then that's a win for us. I would be curious on the other piece for that. So like if you were going to say like, all right, like give me Murray and you're getting back Hurts, and then what's that other piece? I rejected a trade going into week 1 to get Ayuk and Hurts. So like for me, it would take more than that, but I just don't see people wanting to give up more than that. So like, I don't know if the value can be worked out correctly. But I would probably want an RB like 2 or a wide receiver 2 that I can kind of slot into my lineup. Because from a fantasy points perspective, the difference between like the QB1 and QB10 is like 3 points. And the NFC East is apparently god awful at defense for everyone this year, because even Washington can't even do it anymore. So getting those,
the Giants were decent last year too.
Why are the Cowboys showing signs of life though on defense? Though I thought
Trayvon Diggs
for Dak is.
I mean, they used like their entire draft this year on defensive players,
and they got it.
Well.
Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn's had success before, not as a head coach necessarily, but defensively.
He was Legion of Boom, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brief success as a head coach in Atlanta, but the whole body of work now.
Say that Jalen.
He's always been good.
Separate thing though. It's not a straight up trade for that. But say you have Murray and you can bring in a top flight wide receiver or mid tier top flight running back, and then you go and get Jalen Hurts, or he's on your bench. There's a league that I'm in where Josh Allen's starting quarterback and Hurts is on his bench.
Yeah. Okay.
You feel comfortable enough riding Hurts the whole way, considering he's basically a floor of 20 points based on his rushing. And he had 1 touchdown last night and he had 20?
Yeah. I mean,
I thought he had 2 passing touchdowns.
He had 2?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would feel comfortable with it. I'm very QB averse. I never have like a top QB. So
Same.
To me, it's like you have someone like, say, Tannehill. I think he's going to step it up. You could probably get him like pretty cheap. Someone like Sam Darnold, like he's had like a decent enough, like if you had like a terrible matchup or a bye week fill in for Hurts, like you could go there. But I think if people are willing to overpay for a QB, you're definitely getting more value in having that premium position. Obviously, unless you're in like a super flex or something like that. But yeah.
Darren Waller for Josh Allen.
I mean, I would take that all day if I could get Waller out of that deal personally.
What's the most you would give up for a quarterback for like Murray? Because you're with your mindset of how you handle quarterbacks.
I would have to have like more players than I can like possibly start. So if I had like 3 really good receivers and 3 really good running backs, so let's say like,
say you waited on quarterback and you got stuck with Matt Ryan. There's someone in our dynasty league who has Baker Mayfield and Matt Ryan, and he's struggling.
Shocking.
Mightily. Yeah. So, what would you give up to get a top flight quarterback?
I mean, Dynasty.
Dynasty's a different question.
I mean, not a lot.
Let's do redraft.
A redraft
that he has, and he's in our dynasty league.
Let me see. Let me look at.
But see, that I like it would have to be a situation where one of the quarterbacks that I waited on and took wasn't panning out. So like for whatever reason,
awful.
So I have I waited on quarterback, got Dak in a league. I waited on quarterback, got Matthew Stafford. Waited on quarterback, and then got the Hurts and Tannehill combo to go matchup based. So it would. I can't see a scenario where I'm giving up players a different position unless
league, obviously. But there's a lot of chatter within the fantasy community on Twitter about this very scenario.
Yeah,
interesting.
I would want no part of trading, a fringe RB1, RB2.
Would you trade CEH to get Kyler Murray or Josh Allen or Brady? They're the top 3 quarterbacks right now.
Brady, no. I don't think. To me, the way the game has evolved, if you don't have the rushing upside, it doesn't really mean anything to me.
So CEH for Kyler Murray.
I mean, if the Kyler Murray person wants to do that, then yeah, sure.
Yeah, because I'm probably, if I'm a CEH owner, I'm already going out and looking for somebody else to play as my RB2, and my flex at this point is probably a receiver that I drafted. So I'm not even sure if he's in a position where he should be on my starting lineup. So I would trade him to have
it's tough to
find top 2 player.
It's tough to find a trade that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think it almost needs to be a 2-for-1.
Yeah.
Like you would do maybe a Jamar Chase and Hurts or something like that.
That's a good trade. If you're the guy I'd take Chase and Hurts in a heartbeat for one of my top guys.
All right. Is that it?
Yeah. One real quick, just as far as streams for the week. So teams that probably will be available to you. You got Titans versus the Jets. You got the Bengals versus the Jaguars. Lions
tomorrow night.
Yeah. So that's going to be tomorrow night. You got Lions versus the Bears. You also have the Bears versus the Lions. So I think anything that you can get defensively for that game, you'll be all right. As far as kickers go, I could see the Vikings-Browns game having pretty high score. So I could see the Vikings kicker Joseph having a solid day. If Nick Folk hasn't been picked up, I think the Patriots will probably be kicking more field goals than touchdowns than against the Buccaneers. And with the way that the Buccaneers are currently playing defense against the pass, if Mac Jones can show up at all, that should put Folk in a pretty good position. So just some people to look out for as far as streaming options for the week. I don't think we really need to get into quarterback that much. I think there's plenty of different options there. But, yeah, that's all I got for y'all.
Love it.
Joe started charting for this week, so everybody has to check out that tweet that he sent out. It has a lot of great information in that chart about.
Very good. Yeah, Platt texted me to say Joe's a nut and I love it or something like that.
Factually correct. But yeah, just to touch on what you said, Drew. So there's a couple things that we've been posting. The first is target share metrics for each of the first couple of weeks. So what I'm going to start doing is I'm going to be posting both the just the raw data that says, all right, here's what's happening week by week by week, but also then comparing what's been happening the last 3 weeks and how is that trend looking. So say, all right, this player has great 1 week and then it's kind of disappeared, or hey, a Michael Pittman, rolling that off that first week that seems like an outlier now. Hey, this is somebody that you might want to be looking at. And similarly for our points against matchups, so you can see on the Twitter account that we're saying, all right, what's the fantasy points allowed for these teams? And that's something that's also going to trail in a 3-week period. And then we'll be accounting for bye weeks as well. So if you had a team that had a really bad week 1 but has been a stud the rest of the time, then we'll be able to account for that. I think it's a big advantage, especially when you get later into the season. Somebody that comes to mind is the Baltimore defense against tight ends. If you look at who they've played against in tight ends, Darren Waller, Travis Kelce, TJ Hawkinson, and they're giving a crazy amount of points up against tight ends. But you know what? They just played probably the 3 best tight ends in the league. Is that really going to carry forward for the rest of the season? Probably not. But from an ESPN perspective, they're going to be ranked lower in the rankings for the whole year because of that, because tight ends don't put up that amount of points. So it's a good way to look at the information. If you're a DFS player, I think it's a really valuable tool to have. But yeah, excited to keep that out. And those will be coming out every Tuesday. So just subscribe to our Twitter feed. I also post that stuff on Reddit too, if you're into that. But you can find it in a bunch of different places. So just happy to share the knowledge. Unless you're playing against me, don't look at it.
Love Reddit. All right, boys. I think that's going to wrap it up. Good luck to everybody this week, week 4 of the NFL and fantasy football, of course, season gets underway tomorrow night with Cincinnati and Jacksonville. You can tweet at us your questions, your start-sit questions. I guess starting tomorrow, if you got some players going in that game and you're wondering if you should, have them in a slot. But of course, on Sunday morning as well, we'll be interacting with you guys. So follow us at AT412 FF Show. The link to that will be in the description. If you are watching this on YouTube, which I guess at this point you would be, unless for some reason you're watching the whole show back on Twitter, which would be kind of wild, hit us with a subscription, leave us a like, leave us a comment, let us know what you want to see next, turn that notification bell so you know every time that we go live or post a new video. Until next week, we will see you guys then. Best of luck this week. Bye-bye.